Here in my garage, I just brought back home this E30 here from a long road trip just now. It's a lot of fun to drive on the racetrack for track days and autocross. But you know what I treasure a lot more than race cars? Knowledge. I'm actually a lot more proud of these tools I have over here. It's these that keep the car alive. It's like I always say, the more you strive, the more you drive. This E30 right here is my only track car and has been since I started going to the track just over 2 years ago. Back when I was still living in California, it used to be my only car. It used to be so unreliable that the first year I had it, it was only functioning 6 months out of the year. I spent so many months saying that I drove an E30, with the E30 being absolutely nowhere to be seen. Thankfully, my parents didn't have any issue with having an old German shitbox in their driveway. I guess it just added to the aesthetics or something. But however difficult it was to manage, I still really wanted to daily drive this specific car. I landed on this thing with a specific criteria in mind. It needed to be 3,000 pounds, it needed to seat 4 people, it needed to be rear-wheel drive, it needed to be stick shift, and it needed to be at least somewhat reliable. There were a few other options in mind, but most would miss one of these important aspects. I really wanted a Miata, but it couldn't seat 4 people. The SC300 was a heavy boat, and the RX-8 Renesis motor was absolutely unreliable. The only easy-to-find car that met this criteria was the BMW 3 Series. The E46 was just a bit too heavy for my taste, so it was between the E36 and the E30. Back in 2016, when I decided on this car, E30s and E36s were not too far off in price from each other, and the E30 was lighter, was about as fast in a straight line, and was arguably more reliable, at least when looking at the interior. On top of that, Jason Camisa at the same time just released a video on the Motor Trend channel about why this specific car was so special, and so did regular car reviews. I was sold. The desire to drive this specific car that I spent so much time researching and pining over was ridiculously high, but back in 2017, I had absolutely no friends that worked on cars. They were all too busy playing Overwatch. But even though I didn't even know what a camshaft was until a year prior, I was planning on tackling the most difficult repair that someone can do to a car: a head gasket repair. Considering how little outside knowledge I had to go off of, this was absolutely crazy. The delta between my skill level at the time and the difficulty of this repair was higher than it has ever been ever since then. In Elden Ring terms, I was beelining Margit with only 2 hours of experience. I tried to do this as properly as possible. I got the head remachined and replaced all the accessible gaskets, I learned how to replace the timing belt and water pump for the first time, and I found out the engine overheated due to a faulty thermostat installed by the previous shop that had done a timing belt job back while I was in college. When I went to fill the oil after a month of working really slowly, it all just drained straight out of the cylinder head. I was so shocked that I might have messed up the whole repair that I didn't touch the car for another month. Only to discover that I forgot to insert some rubber plugs under the valve cover, a 10-minute correction. She started right up with no problems. I wasted 2 months during summer break working on a repair that should take your average mechanically inclined car enthusiast only a little over a week. E30s are pretty damn simple machines. My lack of funds and friends placed me in a situation that can only be described as a mechanical hell on earth. But the ultimate question is, was it all worth it? Oh boy, was it. The mechanical mental map of my car only started growing after this repair. Every single part started to become related to each other in my brain. From the airbox, to the AFM, to the ICV, to the throttle body, to the vacuum lines providing me with power brakes, to the intake runners, to the oil vent tube, to the charcoal canister. It all started to begin making sense. Shout out to E30 Source for all his old tutorials. I took an auto shop class at my local community college to learn how cars worked when I bought my A30, but it wasn't until I was effectively forced into a difficult situation that I started to truly internalize the mechanical knowledge I carry to this day. The following 2 years, I learned how to replace the clutch, drop the rear subframe, replace the main seals, and do basically every single major repair the car can require. It was back during the COVID years that I basically did all the suspension-related modifications to this car, and I somehow chose the correct parts before ever going to my first autocross. The car feels excellent to drive to this day. So to get to the point of this video, what's the point of this whole story? How is it relevant? Well, if there's one thing I've learned ever since I started going to the track, it's that how much driving you get to do is directly related to how skilled and desperate you are as a mechanic. The stress of that head gasket repair years ago never truly left me. Every single night I'm working on my car the few days before a track event, and every single time something feels off with my car at the track, my brain is operating like it did back in the summer of 2017. Last minute camber changes to get extra tire life. Last minute rides to AutoZone in the middle of the night because I forgot to buy a tie rod. Praying to the RTV and gasket gods that the car doesn't leak. Breaking my engine mounts at an event. Breaking my engine mounts at an event again. Snapping my control arm at Pineview Run and figuring out how to ratchet strap it to the car body to roll it onto my friend's trailer. Crashing my car at VIR because I didn't pay attention at the driver's meeting about polished braking zones in the rain. And then driving 4 hours to find a radiator to get the car running before the following day. You can see me doing this in the background of this particular Gears and Gasoline video. So why do I not have a truck and trailer? It would alleviate me of all the stress of the things I was just talking about. Well, in the same way that head gasket repair changed my attitude towards repairs altogether, I think the experiences I've had breaking my car at racetracks have done the exact same thing. The calmness I feel when something happens to my car and the knowledge that there is almost always a solution to my predicament, it seems to allow me to turn far more laps in my track car for the money than I otherwise would be able to. As an introverted guy, I no longer have reservations about asking random people in the pits for obscure tools that I didn't bring, including asking the Gears and Gasoline crew for an 8mm wrench after I crashed at VIR. Knowing that my track car is my only form of transportation during the day, I am far more careful about bringing spares and tools to fix the car at the track in the worst case scenarios. I guess because I don't have a truck and trailer, I think I am becoming the kind of person that, for the most part, doesn't need a truck and trailer. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't have backup plans. I both have AAA Premier as well as the free towing that comes with my insurance policy. I also sometimes research ahead of time to determine whether or not there are rental trucks and trailers available in the area, and I ask for availability before I show up to the track. Last month was the first time that I had to use my 200-mile AAA tow, but I did have to destroy my transmission in order to put myself in that situation. But there is a unique experience associated with the risk regardless. While I was at National Corvette Museum Motorsports Park, 15 hours away from home, both my front wheel bearings gave out. Already having my chisels, sledgehammer, and a big impact gun ready, and knowing that the complete repair was just a matter of time, and then getting a podium afterwards, there is no experience that can replace it. This is the real-life Mad Max experience.
Got a cracked timing case cover, it's broken a couple of teeth off the timing gear.
I will admit that not everyone is going to get the same experiences that I do when placed in these situations. What tastes like the essence of life to me can be hell on earth to someone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if you don't relate to what I'm saying, know that it's okay. Most people trailered their cars to the track for a reason. There are many legitimate reasons to not do what I'm doing. But at the same time, I'm also doing this for far more than just trying to train myself to become a more responsible mechanic. There's a scene early in Ford vs. Ferrari where after Ken Miles wins a race at Willow Springs, he and his son drive home in the same Cobra he just finished his race in. There is this romantic aspect to a true dual-duty car that exists in the minds of car enthusiasts the world over. Can you imagine if Brian brought his Supra to every race by towing it behind his F-150 Lightning? No, that would be stupid. There is very little media, whether it be games or movies, that depicts cars on trailers, unless they're broken. And I think it's because deep inside, we don't want to see them. I know movies and games are not real life and can depict an idealized situation that isn't realistic, but it is an ideal, and it paints a window into what most of us truly think about trailers: a disappointing necessity. To me, when a car can only get around on a trailer, it's like the soul of the car has been ripped away from it. If I went to my local high school car meet and showed them these pictures or these pictures, which do you think would get the bigger emotional response? We got into cars because cars serve as an extension of our internal selves, our egos. The reason I personally dreamt of road cars as a kid and not track-only trailer queens is because I thought that an S13, for example, could be my car, not some trailer toy that only sits in the garage until it's ready to be used at the track only 10 times a year. I don't want an F-150 or Tacoma or Tundra or some other behemoth big thing to be my car. I bought an E30 partially because I prefer small cars. There are so many reasons to drive an E30 beyond just as a track car. When I see cars on the backs of trailers at the track, why is it mostly built Civics or RX-7s or some other modified desirable road car? Why does everyone with a trailer not just tow around Skippies or Lotus 7 clones or Formula Vs or the new Rush SR? In many cases, those cars are cheaper to run and maintain. For me personally, driving on the track complements the experience of owning this thing. Going to the track is like the ultimate expression of what a sports car is all about. But it has to actually be a car, not some sort of oversized go-kart. In a way, driving the car to the track feels like part of the complete track day experience to me. There's a reason why Gears and Gasoline's most popular videos aren't about their track days, but are instead about the experience of driving cool cars on long road trips. Beyond the perceived insanity of putting a lot of mileage on special cars, we desire the ability to drive our toys into the distance, to use them as cars. So the moment that I realized that this disappointing necessity wasn't actually a necessity, I decided to stop budgeting for a truck and trailer and decided to instead buy more tools and spares just in case I needed them. Check out my spare axles. If my axle blows, I'll be ready. Now OS Geekin just needs to send me a diff. You might have noticed that this video is still quite long. That's because I haven't even talked about the real reason I don't have a truck and trailer. I can only afford 2 cars factoring in depreciation and insurance. And by not having a truck, I get to enjoy this thing all day. Not only does it get better gas mileage than basically any affordable truck, and it's capable of using 87 octane when daily driving, it's also far cheaper than any truck you can buy used in the Northeast. You see, people who live here think that you need a specific car to survive Northeast winters, so that naturally inflates the prices of all the high ride height 4-wheel drive and all-wheel drive cars. There's also a lot of fear that soft tops don't work for winter vehicles, but this is the future. 2010. Soft tops are better now. By getting a car that is almost exactly what people think would be the worst possible winter car you can buy, I saved a ton of money. A Toyota Tundra with 150 miles on the clock costs about 16 grand these days. Meanwhile, I bought this baby for 16 grand during the height of COVID pricing. I really only bought it because I didn't want to rust out my E30 during my first Northeast winter, but because this thing only has 20,000 miles on the clock when I bought it, and was of course already rust-free, aftermarket rust protection was extremely effective. NC2 Miatas specifically are arguably the most reliable Miatas you can buy. NDs now have swap kits to put this transmission into their cars. The MZR engine is known to be extremely reliable, and if something breaks, it's a 2-liter Ford Duratec. Parts are pretty much everywhere. By having an E30 track car that's still comfortable on the street to drive with all my tools to and from the track, it can also double as a hauler for larger packages and furniture. So much space for activities! Leaving me to daily drive an excellent sports car. And because I have a car and not a truck or SUV, I effectively have a spare autocross machine for when the E30 is disassembled. I basically never lose seat time because my car is down, and I'm including the winter months. I won FTD in the two-wheel drive unstudied category at a specific wintercross event once when my LSD was still functioning. If I was a perfectly rational person, I should probably sell my E30 and buy a second NC2 along with the mini trailer with how insanely problem-free and cheap these cars seem to be, but that is not going to happen.
I love you.
So, I get to daily a car that is cheaper, more fuel efficient, more fun, and provides me with emergency seat time. As for winter driving, you're an aspiring race car driver, make sure you have an LSD and get better at driving. If you have a family, I don't know, replace this Miata with some sort of Civic Aside. But the savings of having no trailer don't just apply to the daily commute. Racetracks that host track days are all between 2 and 4 hours away from me. Fuel costs to get to and from an event actually become a factor. I have 195/70/14 all seasons for my E30 to save the track tires on the way to an event. With this setup, I tend to average about 27 miles per gallon to events, which isn't great considering it's only highway miles, but compared to any affordable truck and trailer setup towing a 2,700-pound car getting less than 12 miles to the gallon, it's a Prius. But I know it's not that big of a difference. Assuming a 300-mile round trip for a typical track day, with gas at $3.3 a gallon for 87, it's only a savings of about $44 per event. But it's definitely something. That's a third of a cheap practice tire right there. 12 events a year and you can buy a full set of Kendas or some other cheap practice tire. The bigger saving is actually depreciation. The high mileage Tundra I mentioned earlier would probably get hit the least, but if I were to choose any truck with under 100,000 miles on the clock to keep long term, the extra 4,000 miles in towing would depreciate it about $600 a year. And if you ask me why I don't do the same depreciation calculation on this E30, $12,000, I know what I have. Time Trials Nationals alone was a 2,000 mile round trip. Using the numbers I mentioned earlier, by not owning a truck and trailer, I saved roughly $600 for this one event. This can add up real fast. There are extra factors that save even more, like the fact that I'd still need to change fluids in the track car just as often even if the car sits. At the same time, I'd be spending twice as much on maintenance for the truck with the extra mileage. I would also need to pay insurance for the trailer, and that's like another cheap vehicle to manage, but we don't need to get into that. Honestly, I don't think I'm actually allowed to have a trailer at my residence, so none of these calculations even matter to me. It's all been decided for me. So we've talked about fun factor, and we've talked about money, but I think the most important factor in all this is how it maximizes seat time. By always needing to diagnose and do some sort of fix on my car to either make it home or make it back on the track, my car is always running to some extent, and I'm always aware what problems it has. While others are waiting until the morning after or the following weekend to order parts or fix the car, my car is ready to go for the next track event I have planned. After hearing a few anecdotes and seeing how often trailer vehicles leave events early, I fear that if I start trailering my car, my seat time will actually decline. After I get a repair done, I often just drive back out on the track to shake it down and get extra practice laps in, while those with trailers and those with less mechanical confidence leave at the first sign of an issue. To me, getting those hours in is what performance driving is all about. Track days aren't about proving how fast you are to everyone else and then calling it a day. It's called high performance driver education for a reason. At the grassroots level, the limiting factor is never talent. It's always practice time. We can only afford so many track days a year. 12 events sounds like a lot, but that's only about 20 hours of driving at the limit. I've played more Tekken than I've had seat time, and I am garbage at Tekken. In a weird way, having no trailer somehow pushes me to drive my car until it breaks, because by having every single tool I need to fix it, breaking my car has somehow become less of a big deal at the track. It's gotten to the point that I have extra rocker arms in my spares pouch. Not strictly necessary because the car will run fine on a misfire, but nice to have if one snaps at the beginning of the day. On top of all this, by driving my car on the street so often and beating the ever-living crap out of it, any issues or mistakes I made with my repairs becomes apparent before I'm on the track. I am absolutely terrible about using RTV properly, but at least I can fix the problem before it's dribbling 15W50 all over the paddock. My car is reliable at almost 300,000 miles because I have slowly identified and fixed all the issues the engine has had over the course of the last 3 years of driving it hard and breaking things. Suspension issues tend to only show themselves when pushed on the track, but oil leaks, coolant leaks, and loose bolts can identify themselves on the street after only a few days of driving. Fixing a car is never an exact science. It's difficult to do a large quantity of repairs at once and have them all work perfectly. I can't imagine how many problems I would have had at track events if my mistakes only showed their signs after I arrived. There is nothing worse than paying over $300 for an event just to have the car break during the first session and not have the tools to fix it, even if you can just trailer it home. If I leave for the track early in the morning after a night of last-minute repairs, I usually accelerate hard on the highway to test for any engine issues. If anything is wrong, I fix it as soon as I get to the track, and for bigger issues, I just turn around and fix it in my garage. I might miss my driver's meeting, but better than spilling oil all over the paddock and then losing out on the entire track day. I like to attribute my decent pace on track to sim racing, but if I'm being honest, it's also because as long as my car is alive at an event, I will drive it to the last minute of the last session of the day. Track entry fees are too expensive to do otherwise. So many people online think that racing is only for rich executives that want to drive their expensive toys fast. And it is in a way, but it also doesn't have to be. So that's the majority of my argument. I don't have a trailer because I can't afford it, I want to force myself to become a better mechanic, and I have a weird fetish for suffering. I'm not gonna pretend the financial numbers work for everyone. If you're driving a low mileage 987.2 Cayman S, yes, the cost of putting miles on that thing might swing the equation in the other direction. And you have an expensive car, so this channel is not for you. Also, as someone still in his late 20s, I might have a higher stress tolerance than most people. Replacing a clutch on jack stands is normal for me, and being able to slob squat indefinitely while working on suspension is not something everyone can do. There are also cars that people drive at the track that are simply too complicated to do trackside repairs on. To those I ask, why are you tracking a car that is difficult to repair? If you don't do the repairs yourself, you'll end up paying your mechanic extra labor hours anyways. And if you're a truck guy, more power to you, you were gonna buy a truck anyways, so a trailer isn't that far off. I don't personally like trucks, so I got nothing to say there. I'm speaking to those that deep inside want to go to the track, but that convince themselves otherwise that they need a truck and trailer because they don't trust their cars to get there. If your car's too unreliable to make it to the racetrack, your car was probably going to break down at the track anyways. Once you're confident in your car's reliability, it's then very possible to drive the car to and from the racetrack. It's good due diligence to bring as many spares and tools as you can. You'll probably need to install those spares anyways when you get home if something happens. Car parts stores are everywhere, and you'll most likely not be driving something as niche as this thing anyways. Even so, I still managed to find many parts for this thing at AutoZone. If the lack of a trailer is what's stopping you, I'd say have an escape plan, bring your spares and tools, and even in the worst case scenario, you'll probably still be saving money over the guy with the truck and trailer. So that's my TED Talk. You can buy a cheap car and drive it to the track. Live your Targa Florio dreams and treat your track car like a real car. You'll probably learn faster that way. I do want to close on something important though. Every single time I bring up racetracks, the number one thing I always hear is that I'm a rich, out-of-touch asshole who doesn't understand real finances. I then sometimes stalk those same people online and find out that they bought a new car with a yearly depreciation rate that's higher than the amount that I've spent on repairs and consumables for both my cars for the whole year. The secret I learned is that it's not track cars and consumables that are expensive, it's cars in general that are more expensive than we think. Track drivers are not rare because people don't have enough money to go to the track. Track drivers are rare because your average car enthusiast spends money like it's water. And their spending scales proportional to their income. Identifying where your budget is going is key if your dream is to drive on a racetrack and learn how to drive at 10/10ths. I go to so many car meets and meet so many people in crazy car debt for cars that do nothing but highway pulls and toge racing. and they absolutely spend more, make more, and do less driving than me. I understand that people can like cars for different reasons, but I hear far more of the track fees are too expensive than I want to buy a set of T37s with my money instead, while at the same time I can visually see exactly where the money went into. Showing people the costs up front is scary, but so is understanding how much our cars can cost in general when they aren't being driven hard. According to Edmunds, the 5-year true cost of ownership of an average used 2021 1.4-liter base model Volkswagen Golf, excluding gasoline costs, is over 25 grand. The calculation assumes an average interest car loan, and this is a Volkswagen, so maintenance costs can be higher than average. But the point is that so many of us are blind to expenses that are considered normal, while simultaneously scoffing at expenses for things that are out of the norm, like track entry fees. Just have a plan and budget for your spending. Your future self will thank you for it, and it removes the emotional aspects of spending a large quantity of money. Race teams have budgets for exactly this reason. So after doing some napkin math, I'm definitely not buying a truck and trailer anytime soon. The worst case rental cost of a U-Haul and dolly all the way from Bowling Green, Kentucky to here is about $1,000. That's still a fraction of the yearly expenses associated with trailer and truck ownership, and I don't really have a use for a trailer outside of this specific hobby. The weird idiosyncrasies of track car ownership and the expenses associated with it that are hidden from public life are exactly the kinds of topics that I want to tackle on this channel. Not everyone can afford or should spend their money on this hobby. It is still very expensive, but so many more people can afford this than we believe. This, to me, is what grassroots motorsports is all about.
You think about